right, everybody, good morning, or I should say good afternoon. Sorry about that. My name is Heather Bryan, and I'm an education specialist with the educationprojects.org. On behalf of our client, Ohio Corn and Wheat, I would like to welcome you all to the technology virtual lesson. We're excited for this opportunity to partner with Ohio Department of Education to bring you the Feed and Fuel Your Future virtual learning series. The Feed and Fuel Your Future virtual learning series is a 4-week series connecting science through agriculture. This week, our topics are focused on technology in the field. In addition to the yield prediction lesson today that we'll be offering a chance to explore career options with students through an interactive career panel tomorrow on Thursday. And we hope that you can join us. Today, we're going to take a quick look at Feed the World, as you can see in front of you right now. It's the Ohio Corn and Wheat's education program where we focus on engaging students with important issues like sustainability, water quality, biotechnology, and energy production through the lens of agriculture. So let's take a look at this website really quickly so that I can show you where we'll find the curriculum that we'll be using today. So follow my mouse just a little bit. Here at Feed the World, you can go to the curriculum page. And you will see that when you click on curriculum, we're going to go down today to Growing Ohio. So when you click on Growing Ohio, we'll mostly be using this lesson here, field work, yield prediction test, which I'll show you in just a minute. But also for your use, there are several things that you can use down here in our resource column to help you with yield prediction or scouting for pests. One of the things that we might look at today is the corn growth poster. So that'll be great. It helps you to really understand how corn grows and what area is vital for proper sunlight and nutrition. So nutrients in the field as well as rain. So let's take a look here really quick at the lesson we're going to use today. Okay, so this looks like a pretty simple lesson, but it can really be actually very complicated. So if you have an opportunity to print this off, field work, the yield prediction test, you're going to see some experts in the field today helping us to make some yield predictions and realize that it's easy to get it wrong. So, and then also talk a little bit about some of the different ways today that we can do some research to help improve yield. So just by increasing the length per kernel, so the depth of the kernel, that can really increase yield quickly, as well as using some technology to help us, just spot some things in the field that might be decreasing our yield. So things that we can look at ahead of time and fix so that our yield is stable. Let's go back to where we were here. Oops. I'm trying to get back into presentation mode, so give me just 1 second there. All right, so as you're looking at this slide in front of you, just 1 second, I want to make sure that we're looking at it from presentation. There we go. It's much better that way. As you're looking at this slide in front of you, I just wanted to show you, this is one of the resources that you can use online. This first set of growth stages that you see for a corn plant specifically are the vegetative stages. So this is where it's really important, because if you want to think about kids growing up, this is where kids, or the corn plant in this particular instance, are growing rapidly. So they're reaching their physiological stage as rapidly as possible. And they're really gathering up a lot of energy through the process of photosynthesis so that they can then reproduce later on in the next stage. So as a farmer, as I plant corn and I'm hoping for a good yield as an end product, it's very important to me to make sure that I am paying attention to these initial stages, beginning with things such as population. So today you're going to hear a farmer talk about how population influences yield at the end, so our harvest at the end. And so these are really important things to discuss with your teachers as well as your fellow students as you're thinking about what are some things that can impact yield and how can we use technology to help prevent that. So how can we increase our yield by utilizing technology in the field? Let's look at the next set of growth stages for corn. All right, this is the next stage. So after the corn is rapidly growing, kind of going through its youth and its teenage years, and then it hits adulthood, we're here then in the reproductive stages. And those are characterized by the letter R that you see below the plants. In this stage, the corn is not going to get any taller. So it's really maxed out on its physiological size that it will grow in the field. And what it's now doing is putting all of the energy, all of the work that is done to reach that sunlight, to produce that energy into producing kernels of corn. And those kernels of corn are what we count to create our harvest or our yield in the end. And the products that we use to feed animals and other livestock that we like to eat, such as eggs or chicken, poultry, and beef, for example. I think I forgot to say pork in there, sorry about that, but also to produce a really good quality fuel product known as ethanol. So corn is vital to our economy because it helps us to both produce a fuel as well as a feed product. And so we really benefit from making sure that we're using as much technology as we can to improve our harvest. So as you look here at this reproductive stage of corn, just take a look. You'll see that it's very actively growing in green on the left side of your screen. And by the time you get to the R6 stage, known as the black line stage, you'll see, or the black layer stage, you'll see that it's starting to wither a little bit. And that's really what we want to see. So as you're checking out the corn today, and as you're looking at the corn that we'll see in some of the pre-recorded videos, take a look at that corn and try to estimate what stage of growth that corn is in. Okay, let's keep going. We have offered you some images of corn in case you don't have access to dent corn at home or in your classroom. And so here is just a couple of images of corn that came from the same row in the same field. And just look how different they all are. It's really interesting. It's always interesting to me to take a look at the corn and look for differences. People think that that corn out there is all the same thing, and it's really not. As you're looking at this corn in this image, notice that some of the rows are a little turned or twisted. What are some of the environmental influences that could cause that? Can that impact our yield later on? There is some corn that's almost perfect. One of the things you might notice in this corn is that it seems to have a hole or a dent at the end, and that's really what we'd like to see because that's why it got its name dent corn. And dent corn is a type of corn that has been developed so that it can dry naturally in the field. And one of the ways a farmer can utilize this information is by seeing how far is the dent, how hard is the kernel, because it's important for this corn to dry down to about 18 or less percent in the field, optimally about 15% moisture at the end, so that we can store that corn for a long period of time and transport it all over the world so that it can be used for both livestock feeds as well as human consumption and, of course, fuel production too. So if you don't have an ear of corn at home, you could definitely use this picture that you see here, or even better, the picture that we see here now. So we'll actually come back to this image, but what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be counting the rows of the corn. So as you have an ear, feel free to break it in half later on today, and you'll see that as we count here, I'm going to use my mouse so you can see, it's interesting that corn always develops rows in even numbers. So let's start right up here and let's count those together. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. This particular ear of corn, so this is actually the ear of corn that we use later on in the video, has 16 rows of corn. And that's really important information that we can utilize for yield prediction. Now let's take the next look here. On this image of dent corn, it's also really important that you're able to count the number of kernels in a row. So far, we've gathered information that allows us to see the number of rows on an ear of corn. Okay, and now we're going to count the number of kernels that you can find in a row. So let's do that together. I'm going to put my mouse here on this row of corn, and we're going to count together up until it gets to about the tip. Okay, first of all, I better write these numbers down so we can use them later on. So 16 rows versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then 21, 22, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30. There are a lot of kernels in this row, guys. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 40. I feel like I should count those again. And then 41, 42, 43. So if we would have 43 kernels in a row and we multiply that number by 16 rows per ear of corn, that'll give us a great estimate of how many kernels there are on an ear of corn. Okay, so that's the first part in using our data in our yield prediction. Let's keep going on. Okay, in this particular video, our friend Josh Yoder, who's an excellent farmer in Central Ohio at Plain City, Ohio, he is going to help do some of this and just right in the field like they would do, every day on their farm. So let's take a listen to what he has to say.
So what we're doing here today is we're going to take a few minutes and show you how you estimate corn yield. So when you think about that process, you first start with thinking about the area in which you're working. So we raise corn on 30-inch rows, and so to get an estimate of corn yield, we like to take an estimate of 1/1000th of an acre, because that's the metric in which we measure yield. So to do that, you measure 17.5 feet down the row on 30-inch rows. That equates to 1/1000th of an acre. So if, for instance, you find 32 ears in that 17.5 feet, that means that your final stand of corn was 32,000 seeds per acre. So once you have that number of how many seeds per acre, or how many plants per acre, if you will, then you take ears. You take a sample of ears once every fifth year, or a whatever your preference is sample size.
All right, so let's review what we just learned. So when we were looking at Josh was doing a great job explaining how corn grows and how it's planted in the field. And that's really important information that we can utilize to help predict our yield overall. So just to review quickly what he said that as most farmers plant 30-inch rows, okay, that we're going to mark off 17.5 feet. And when we mark that distance off, that will equally represent 1/1000th of our field. As you take a look at your lesson, you can see on that grid that there's also some places where if you do a 15-inch row, so you can see how long you would need to go for that, okay? But in this particular instance, for a 30-inch row, we're going to pace out 17.5 feet, and we will recognize that that is 1/1000th of our field, or our acre of corn there. Okay, then we're going to count the number of plants that are in that 17.5 feet so that we can come up with what we call our population per acre. And that sounds really crazy, but farmers plant a whole bunch of corn seeds per acre. It's really kind of amazing. And if you walk out into a field of corn, you can easily get lost in all that corn because it is such a dense crop. It's kind of like a jungle out there. So in this instance, he estimated that there were 32 plants in that 17.5 acre, or 17.5 feet. So all we have to do is take those 32 plants and multiply that by 1,000 to get an overall acre population of 32,000 plants per acre. Whew. And then what we'll do is we're going to pull an ear about every 5 plants or so, and we can go ahead and gather that data and get an average of that data to make our yield prediction. So let's see what happens next.
Take each ear and you count. You first look at to count the number of kernels, and we do that by first counting the number of rows round. So this particular ear has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 rows round. And you'll always find an even number of rows round. That's just how the corn plant determines how many rows round. It's always in pairs. And then from there, you count the kernel, how many rows long. So this one would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4, 5, 6. So 16 by 36.
Okay.
Take each ear.
Whoops.
And you can.
I'm gonna pause that and move forward. So let's review again. So Josh was really kind and showed us that, again, rows appear on a kernel or ear of corn in pairs. So he counted those out and there were 16. So 16 is the lucky number today. And then he went ahead and he counted the number of kernels that you could use in that ear of corn, in which there's still 16 rows of corn. So not quite all the way to the end. Okay, is what we're saying. So if you look here on our review sheet, what we're going to do is we're going to take 16 rows per ear, and we're going to multiply that by the 36 kernels in a row to get an estimate of 576 kernels per ear of corn. And just as a reminder, if you're not in Ohio this year, we had a bit of a drought this summer. So actually, this might even be a small ear of corn, just to think about. Okay, next then what we're going to do is he's going to show us how to multiply that out so we can get a better feel for what that yield prediction overall will be.
So then the last piece of the puzzle, if I can break this, is how many kernels it takes to create a bushel of corn. Typically, if you don't really have a good understanding of what that might be, most people use 90,000 kernels per bushel of corn, but that varies because it all is determined by kernel depth. So what farmers have been trying to do in recent years to increase yields has been to increase the depth of kernel fill. And so if for instance it takes 60,000 kernels per bushel, then the amount of kernels and the amount of bushels that you can end up raising, the yield basically goes up dramatically. So so to calculate this particular yield, so if this ear were respective of the field, you would take 32,000, which is the plants per acre that we found, times 16
Times
times
36.
36, and then you would divide that by 90,000. So this particular ear represents 205 bushel corn.
Wow. All right, so let's review again what he said. He said that on average, with the average kernel depth, do you remember that term that he used, kernel depth? So that's how much the fill is on that kernel, that we can get approximately on average 90,000 kernels of corn per bushel. And just for your reference, a bushel of corn is 56 pounds. So if you had a bag full of a bushel of corn, you would have to lift up that 56 pounds to get a feel for how much 90,000 kernels weighs, the volume of it, everything. It's a lot of corn. And so when we're thinking about that, I want you to think in the back of your mind, well, really, how many plants does that represent? So how many corn stalks and ears of corn in the field are needed to create a bushel of corn? If you remember, Josh said that it was a 32,000 population, so plants per acre of corn that they thought. And he also said that they had about 205 bushels per acre. So think about that just a little bit in your mind, and we'll come back to that. But I want you to just look at our review sheet here in front of us. If it takes 90,000 kernels per bushel of corn, and in our particular acreage, we estimate to have 32,000 ears, so it's one ear per plant in that acre. And then we have 16 rows on each one of those ears, okay, as well as 36 kernels in each row. We multiply all of that out, and then we divide that by the number of kernels per bushel, so 90,000, so that we can come up with the average of 205 bushels per acre. And if you live in central Ohio, that might actually be low because we've had a drought this year. If you live in northern Ohio, that could be pretty average or even high, depending upon your soil type. Gosh, if you live over in Illinois, that would definitely be low because they have great soil over there. So remember that yield is also dependent on environmental factors as well as climatic factors. So as we're moving forward, I just want you to be thinking in your head again, if we have 205 bushel corn per acre, and we had 32,000 plants to begin with, how many plants is that overall to create a bushel of corn? All right, in this last video right here, Josh Yoder is joined by his father, Fred Yoder, and they're going to just check, because it's always a good idea to review your work. Before, Josh was kind of estimating what he thought would happen. And so his dad came in and said, no, it's really better to do everything by the book. And so we're going to watch him right now.
Okay, here. Come back here.
Yeah. So it might be just a tad better.
All right, so let's review what we saw. I'm going to play this one more time. What you see is Josh Yoder and Fred Yoder actually pulling out a tape measure so that they can estimate 17.5 feet in the field. Then you see Fred Yoder moving backwards towards Josh, counting the stalks of corn. So he actually said that that corn is 34, not 32, in a row of 17.5 feet. So really what that means is that the yield might be better because they now have 2,000 more plants per acre that they didn't realize was there. So let's move on. As a review, we know that 90,000 kernels on average are needed to make a bushel of corn, which is 56 pounds. So as you're looking at this, let's change our numbers just a little bit. Instead of the 32,000 population per acre we thought we had, we're going to adjust that to 34,000 ears per acre. Then again, we're going to multiply that by the 16 rows per ear, as well as the 36 kernels per row, and then finally divide that number by the 90,000 kernels per bushel. And check this out, we now have 217 bushels per acre instead of 205. So even if you have a 10-acre field, that's quite a big difference, a lot more money in your pocket. So you can see how being exact is really important to get a good idea of where you can take your yield prediction. Let's just take a look at some of the other things that we can talk about today that can help farmers get a better feel for how their yield will be. The great thing about this yield prediction test that you saw the Yoder's doing for us today is that it's a quick and easy way to get an estimate. But there's other ways which we can get an exact count. So as you're looking at this Phantom drone, which on average I would say is about $1,000 or a little more currently, it might be a cheap piece of technology that a farmer can purchase to implement and get a better feel of data that's out in their field. So a Phantom drone does a really good job at taking imagery and population counts. So the farmer could actually count the population in the entire field and do a yield prediction test that way to get a more accurate count later on. Drones are really great and they're fantastic uses of technology. What's really cool about drones is they do a whole bunch of things. We don't always use the information they give us, but they are able to provide a lot. One of the things that we've found is that when we use drones like the Phantom to take imagery data for us, we can go ahead and we can just do stand count. So how many plants are there out there per acre? We can also do NDVI, so we can see how the plants are growing. And areas where there's more plants versus less plants, we'll see different colors that will appear later on. There's just a lot of cool things. But even now, we're taking drones to a different level to use them in our field to improve our yield later on. So as you take a look at this drone, this is actually a sprayer drone. And instead of $1,000, you're going to be paying closer to over $30,000. And so when you're looking at this, or more, this is a drone that can actually spray per acre or more to help with some problems that you might have in your field. Maybe you have some pests, or maybe you have some mold or something out there that's growing, or maybe certain corn needs a little more nitrogen. What you can see is that this drone can come along and it can actually spray and help improve your yield later on. So we've gone from a data collecting drone to more of an application drone now. And our technology is continuing to improve, as you can see here in just a sec. This is really cool because this is going to show you how we can help program those drones like a sprayer drone in our field itself. So we've taken data that we've gotten from soil samples, we've gotten from hybrid variety, population count, all kinds of data that you can see there. And what we've done is we've programmed specific areas that might need a touch up or a little bit of help. And so here you'll see in area 2, so S4, where the yellow lines are moving across, that's actually a programmed pathway for that drone. And so let me give you a video where you can see how this drone might work. So this is just a simulation, but it's really cool to think that we are now at the point where we can actually help improve yield quickly by bringing in some smaller units like these sprayer drones to help us out. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so right now it's climbing to altitude. So that way it's clear a fence or a pickup or whatever park area. It's going to head to the area that we're going to call the field, over here beyond the concrete. Now you'll watch it drop down, get itself lined up for the paths it's going to make. And here in a minute, it'll take off and it'll make parallel paths of about 15 to 20 foot in width while it's sprayed. And it's doing all this based on a predetermined path that was put into the computer by the operator, and it'll spray about 6 acres every time we load it full.
All right, so what we saw there was a great, just quick demonstration of how that sprayer drone can be programmed and help utilize different mode of actions to help improve our yield later on. Other ways that farmers can use yield, as you can see in front of you, is by using accounts like this farm server account that's offered by Beck's Hybrids. And let's just take a look at these maps really quick. In the bottom left, you're looking at a map that helps with yield. So remember how Josh was trying to predict yield just by going out into the field and doing a quick scout? Well, this is using NDVI and yield data that you see on your combine. So the combine is actually recording how much is coming in each area of the field, and it's putting that data right there in front of you. Then in addition, you can see up here, they can even break that down by hybrid. So and below that soil type. So they might plant a particular hybrid in a particular soil type, or just to test it out. And you'll see that all of those things can help to impact yield later on. For instance, right here, this little red zone that we see down here in the bottom yield map, as we move up here to this hybrid map, you'll see that that's the same zone up here in blue. So what's interesting is this is actually a replant. So what that means is, for some reason in the spring when they planted, these crops didn't take off well. They had to come back in and replant those zones. And so you can see here that their photosynthetic activity is less than it is for the established plants over here. All of these things help a farmer to make decisions that will impact their yield in the following year. So let's take a look here. As we continue to do some other data analysis with technology for yield prediction, you can see that this stuff can help us to do different chemical applications or use dry fertilizer maps or even tillage later on. As you can see up here in this top right, this is a population count. So remember earlier when I said we can use technology to give us an exact population count versus just one trip out into the field or several trips out into the field for our yield prediction. So we can actually take this and it can help us to make a yield prediction later on. And down here, what you're seeing is the layer weight down here. So this is again yield for soybeans, as you can see. And on top of that yield is the soil types that you see. And so we can now go ahead and start to layer map upon map so that we can see, do we need to apply more nutrient or less nutrient? Is it a particular soil type? What can we do as farmers to improve our yield? Gosh, that was a quick lesson. I just want to thank you guys all for coming along. And I want you to really think about, as you're thinking about your future careers, I may not want to be a farmer. Perhaps I don't want to get in a tractor or go out there and look at the plants, but I might really be interested in some of the technology that I saw today. So it's all crucial when we're thinking about producing food into the future. And so I really want to thank you for joining us today and remind you that tomorrow we have some great leaders that are going to be on our technology career panel. As a matter of fact, Nick is one of the young gentlemen that created that sprayer drone that you saw there. And we have some research scientists from Ohio State University, Chris, who has developed a different type of drone that actually goes down and takes a tissue sample of the plant to see how it's growing. And so if you have any interest in technology tomorrow, I would highly suggest you join that career panel at 1 p.m. and ask your questions. All right, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you soon, and don't forget to go to ohiocorneducation.org to find these lessons, as well as the videos in the future. Have a wonderful day.